When David passed away, the world seemed to slow down, as though grief itself had a weight that pressed down on everything I did. For over 30 years, he had been my partner, my best friend, and the quiet strength behind our modest but beautiful life. The funeral had come and gone, filled with carefully rehearsed condolences and distant family members who only seemed to remember us during tragedy. I sat in the living room afterward, the silence roaring in my ears, surrounded by frames of moments that now felt like fragments of a different era. There were pictures of our wedding, our daughter's graduation, camping trips, and anniversaries that blurred together with the passing of years. Yet, no matter how long I stared at them, none of them hinted at the storm that was waiting behind. The garage door, the garage David's sanctuary. He would disappear in there for hours on weekends, tinkering, fixing, and sometimes just reading manuals for old tools he didn't even own. I never questioned it. It was his space, just as the garden was mine. But something changed after his death. A week had passed, and as I walked past the garage for the 100th time, something urged me to finally open it. Not out of curiosity, but out of need. I had to start cleaning, sorting, finding pieces of closure wherever I could. With trembling hands, I pulled out the key from the small drawer where David always kept it. The metal felt cold and heavier. Then I remembered. I took a breath and inserted it into the lock. It clicked with ease, almost too easily, like it had been waiting. I pulled the door up, and what I saw didn't just confuse me. It shattered the entire narrative of my life. It wasn't the mess of tools or stacked paint cans I had expected. Instead, it was ... to clean, and naturally so. Like someone had recently been there, organizing and preparing it for something. And then I saw the boxes identical, labeled meticulously in David's handwriting, with names, dates, and codes I didn't understand. My heart pounded as I stepped. Inside, the air musty yet strangely undisturbed. It didn't smell like dust and gasoline like it used to. It smelled sterile, almost clinical. I walked over to the nearest box, labeled July 1989 private. That was the year we got married. My hands shook as I lifted the lid. Inside were photographs I had never seen, and none of them included me. In fact, they included people I didn't even know. One woman appeared frequently, a red-haired woman with a sharp jawline and laughing eyes. She was with David in every photo, holding hands, at the beach. In what looked like someone's home, my throat dried. There were letters too, all addressed to my love. My name was nowhere. I sat down hard on the concrete floor, the box open on my lap, the world spinning. I had no idea who she was, but David's words made it clear. He loved her, deeply, passionately. The dates on the letters ranged from 1988 to 2002. That meant he had been writing to her before and after our wedding, through the birth of our child, through every holiday and anniversary we shared. How had I never known? I went through the rest of the box, finding receipts from hotels, boarding passes to cities he claimed he never visited, and gifts he clearly never gave to me. I moved on to the next box, hoping it was all a mistake, but the second one was worse. It held items like a passport in a name I didn't recognize, Martin Hughes, but with David's photo. The passport had stamps from countries he never told me he'd been to: Russia, Morocco, Brazil. There were IDs, credit cards, even a second phone. Everything pointed to another life, a life parallel to ours, one he kept hidden. The garage I thought was full of spare tools and fishing gear was, in fact, a vault of his secrets. And as I opened more boxes, I felt my entire existence begin to collapse. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was undercover for something. A government agent, but David worked in insurance. A boring 9-to-5 desk job. He came home at regular hours, brought dinner on Fridays, and watched the same sitcoms with me every night. There had never been any red flags, no secret phone calls, no absences, no strange behavior beyond his obsession with the garage. Yet the evidence said otherwise. Another box revealed notebooks, dozens of them, each filled with cryptic notes, sketches, maps, and timelines. He had tracked people, dates, even me. There were detailed logs of where I went, who I called, what I said on certain days. At first, I thought it was creepy. Then terrifying. Why would my husband spy on me? Did he not trust me, or was this part of some larger web? Then came the photographs of me, taken when I wasn't looking, at the grocery store, walking our daughter to school, talking to friends. They weren't romantic. They felt like surveillance, like I was a target, not a partner. I began to panic, my mind spinning in every direction. Was he dangerous? Was my life even real? Did our daughter know? I picked up one of the black notebooks with shaking fingers. Inside were documents labeled contingency plan. Subject L was me. It detailed what to do if I ever found out, relocation options, statements to be issued, even a fictional medical record claiming I had early onset dementia. I dropped the notebook like it burned me. This wasn't just a double life. This was some kind of operation. My David, the man who rubbed my feet and cried at sappy movies, was planning for the day I uncovered all this and had a way to discredit me when I did. I stood in the middle of the garage, surrounded by the life he kept locked away, and realized I didn't know him at all. There was one box left in the corner. It was different, old, covered in dust, and locked with a combination. I stared at it, both dreading and desperate to know what was inside. After trying David's birthday, our anniversary, and our daughter's birth date, the lock finally clicked open on the fourth try, 1987, the year before we married. Inside was a velvet pouch. I opened it to reveal a gold locket. It had a picture of David and the red-haired woman. Underneath, a tiny key. A folded note rested beside it. It read, "If you've come this far, I'm sorry. This wasn't how you were meant to find out. But there's one more thing you need to see. No signature, just coordinates." I entered the coordinates into my phone. They led to a storage facility on the other side of town. I didn't hesitate. I got in the car and drove, the silence in the vehicle louder than ever before. The storage unit was old, the metal door rusted, but it opened with the tiny key from the locket. Inside, I found furniture, photos, and toys, an entire second home. One with family photos of David, the red-haired woman, and a boy. A teenage boy who looked exactly like our daughter. I staggered back, heart pounding. David had another family, a second child. While he lived with me, laughed with me, and built a life with me, he did the same with her. The betrayal was complete. The love I thought was ours alone was divided between two lives, neither of which I fully understood anymore. The boy was listed in a school enrollment document as David's son. That made our daughter his half-sister. The deception was so deep, so detailed, I couldn't begin to count the lies. I collapsed in a dusty old armchair, staring at the photos. And for the first time since his death, I cried not for losing David, but for losing the illusion of who he was. The drive home from the storage unit was a blur of streetlights and static on the radio. I couldn't tell what was real anymore, whether the woman in those pictures was still alive, whether the boy even knew I existed, or if any of them had known about me. And more terrifyingly, I didn't know if our daughter was part of the lie, or another unknowing victim. When I arrived, the house felt unfamiliar, like I was walking into someone else's carefully staged life. I went straight to the garage again, this time combing through every drawer and shelf. Hidden behind an old paint can, I found a small metal box filled with keys, burner phones, and yet another set of IDs, all under different aliases. The photo on one of the IDs was recent, taken just last year, meaning that whatever double life David lived, it didn't stop in the past. It continued right up to his death. My mind began racing with questions I couldn't answer. Had he been running from something? Was he protecting us or was he deceiving us all? Then I found the file. A thick folder labeled "If Found by Lucy." That was my name. My breath caught in my throat as I opened it. Inside were handwritten letters, dozens of them. Some were dated years ago, others only a few months back. Each began with "Dear Lucy," and as I read, I could feel David's voice, his tone calm and deliberate. He explained nothing at first, only offered apologies. Page after page of guilt, confession, and pleas for forgiveness. He admitted to leading to lies, said he had been recruited for private operations during the Cold War, and that what began as espionage bled into his personal life. He fell in love with 2 women, built 2 families, and never had the courage to choose between them. He claimed he loved me deeply, that every moment with me was real, but he was a coward. I always feared that one day you'd find the garage key, one letter read, and when you did, it would destroy you. But I couldn't leave it all behind. I couldn't let go of any of it. I clutched the pages in my hands, angry and broken and numb. Because even in death, he held power over my reality, and I still didn't know what to believe. For days, I didn't speak to anyone. I avoided calls from friends checking in, ignored my daughter's texts asking if I was okay, and refused to even look at the garage door. I barely ate. I moved from the bed to the couch to the kitchen and back again like a ghost in my own home. But eventually, I had to face the inevitable. My daughter deserved to know. She was in college, away from home, unaware that her entire family tree had just grown a secret branch. I asked her to come home for the weekend, and when she arrived, I could hardly look her in the eye. Her father had always been her hero, her confidant, her steady presence. How could I break that image? But I had no choice. I showed her the letters. I took her into the garage. I watched her world collapse too. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stared at the photos, the maps, the fake IDs. She opened one of the notebooks and flipped through it silently. Is that him?" she asked, pointing to a photo of the boy. I nodded. "Your half-brother," I whispered. She sat down slowly, processing it all. Then she did something that surprised me. She stood up, walked to the corner of the garage, and opened a cabinet I hadn't noticed before. "Dad used to keep this locked," she said. Inside was a black duffel bag. It held a tape recorder. She pressed play. David's voice filled the garage, calm, measured, as if he knew this day would come. "If you're listening, then I'm gone, and I owe you the truth." The recording was nearly an hour long, detailing a life I never imagined: spying, smuggling documents, blackmail, and eventually abandoning the agency to protect the people he loved. He spoke of the red-haired woman whose name was Evelyn and their son who never knew the full story. He said he'd wanted to come clean for years but feared he'd lose everything. "Lucy," he said at the end, "you were the love I never deserved. And I'm sorry for the years I stole from you." I turned the recorder off. My daughter was pale, her eyes wet. "What do we do now?" she asked. And I didn't know. We decided to find them. Not out of vengeance, not to cause pain, but for closure. I needed to see Evelyn. I needed to look into her eyes and ask if she knew. I needed to know whether she was as blindsided as I was, or whether she had been complicit in the illusion. Using the documents in the garage, we traced her to a small town about 2 hours away. She still lived in the house pictured in the storage unit. We drove there on a gray Saturday morning, each mile stretching the tension inside the car. When we arrived, I recognized the house instantly: white porch, blue shutters, wind chimes by the window. I knocked. Evelyn answered. She hadn't aged much. Her red hair was grayer now, but her eyes were still the same. She stared at me for a long moment before saying, "You must be Lucy." My stomach dropped. "You knew about me," I whispered. She nodded slowly. "Not at first, but eventually, yes." She invited us in, and over tea, she unraveled the rest of the story. David had met her first. They had fallen in love. But when he was recruited for covert work, he was told to cut all personal ties. That's when he met me when he tried to start fresh, but he couldn't stay away from Evelyn. He returned to her, and from that point on, he led to lives. He was careful, she said. He kept everything separate. I didn't know about your daughter until a few years ago. He never told me your name. My daughter sat silently beside me, processing everything. Then Evelyn said something that stopped my heart. He wanted to come clean. He was preparing. That's why he left you the letters. He was going to tell you everything this year. He was planning to finally choose. I wanted to scream. He was always planning to tell the truth, planning to leave, but never actually doing it. He died with all of us still in the dark, I said bitterly. Evelyn nodded. Yes, and we all loved him anyway. For the first time in days, I didn't cry. I just stared at the empty space in front of me, the ghost of the man we both thought we knew. Weeks passed. The shock dulled into a strange sort of numb acceptance. I boxed up most of the items from the garage and sealed them away in storage. My daughter returned to college, a little older in spirit, a little more cautious in trust. We kept in touch, daily, healing in small, quiet pieces. As for Evelyn and her son, we stayed connected, not as enemies, not as friends, but as people bound by one man's lie. Sometimes we'd exchange emails. Occasionally, my daughter and her half-brother would chat. They had more in common than I expected, both smart, both cautious, both raised by a man who had lived a lie. One afternoon, I stood in the garage again, empty now except for one shelf of tools and the scent of oil and old paper. I held the final letter David had left me. It wasn't about espionage or lies. It was about love. I never stopped loving you, it read. You are my balance, my peace, my second chance at life. I folded it and placed it back in the drawer. I didn't know if I believed his words anymore. But they were all I had left. The world had turned upside down that day I opened the garage. I lost my husband, my sense of reality, and the story I thought my life had been, but I also found the truth. No matter how painful it was, and in truth, I found strength. Because even if David had lived in shadows, I could still walk forward in light. I closed the garage door slowly, not with grief this time, but with quiet resolve. Some chapters don't end with answers, they end with choice. And I was ready to choose peace over pain and honesty over illusion. My world had been rewritten, yes. But it wasn't over. It was just beginning again.